The development, the creation of this hospital confirms that it's possible to build units and hospitals for adults with learning disabilities and autisms, even though we believed we had closed our hospitals, and despite the government's commitment to people with learning disabilities and autism being supported to live in our communities. The other lesson is one that I know my colleagues will be reiterating throughout the day, that the existence of these units gets in the way of us doing other things. It seems to me that a not terribly challenging recommendation that I'm quite passionate about is there are 51 former patients of Winterbourne View Hospital, and to me there is a commissioning challenge. What would it take to make it possible for people to have a very different experience, where we don't dispatch them 200 miles up the road, but we actually work with families to say, what would it take to support you? There are clearly obstacles, however, to demonstrating what this is. And as you know, a serious case review has no clout whatsoever. I can only make the suggestion that this would be really very helpful. I was struck in my contact with families and with some former patients that I was struck that there was a refrain about this assessment and treatment unit and others, that we take the most difficult, the most challenging, the people that nobody else will accommodate. So I expected in the scrutiny of reports to read about some terrifying individuals. I didn't. And I read about some people who were clearly very troubled. And I'm just going to give you a very quick summary of one man who's described as Tom, who's called Tom in the report, who lived with his parent and very young sibling and had been bullied at college, but surfaced from that experience and went on to get a job. Did incredibly well in his employment. His mother was incredibly proud of him. He was proud of himself. He did so well that he was offered a promotion. And at that point, things got harder for him because he couldn't quite handle the promotion. And one day at work, he had what his mother described as a big bust. He exploded. And it was so shocking for the employers and employees that he was excluded permanently from the workplace. At that point, the family needed help. They desperately needed help. And yet Tom was then at home permanently. Their family were offered respite care, but this was a young man who hadn't required that sort of service before. He became very depressed and distressed and ultimately suicidal, at which point his mother recognised that she couldn't manage. The only service that was offered was Winterbourne View Hospital, and he was admitted to the hospital. And she described a van arriving with darkened windows and men in uniform taking her son and being told on the pavement, leave him with us for a month, don't visit for a month. She said, I was appalled. He's never left the family before. I'm not leaving him for a month. He'll think we've thrown him out. He was in Winterbourne View Hospital and he reported reliably to his mother things that were happening. He was scared of the staff, he was scared of some of the things that were happening. And mother kept going to the hospital and to the manager and saying, this is what Tom's saying. He's saying that he's been pushed, he's been pulled around, he's had carpet burns, his jacket's torn, his shirts are torn, look at the state of his clothes. Why is this happening? And she was reassured by the manager that he would say that because he wants to go home. So she was incredibly angry that the staff within the hospital colluded in pretending that things were all right and that her son was in fact telling lies. I firmly believe that a debt is owed to the former patients, and I have suggested that in one recommendation. But Tom there isn't a happy ending for Tom. He was so distressed by some of the events within Winterbourne View Hospital that he could not return to what had looked like a very promising service in his hometown. And he is now in a secure unit. And he's in the secure unit because he burned the clothes that he wore when he was in Winterbourne View Hospital. Such was the effort to separate himself from the experience. And because we saw how terrifying it was for Simon to be in the bathroom, it was also terrifying for other men, and I believe women patients as well. And Tom started peeing in cups because he couldn't bear the experience of going into the toilet. It was such a terrifying place to be. The place where we should be most private and feel most safe has been terrifying. And he is now in a secure unit. And I tell you about Tom because his experience is not that atypical. The histories of other patients spoke of bereavements, typically when they were very young, so mothers dying or leaving the family home, certainly violations, physical, sometimes sexual violations, and rejection. People's aspirations were very familiar. People wanted to have partners, they wanted to have best friends, they wanted a home, they wanted jobs. This is not an atypical population, and their distress are not, whether it's around bereavement and that's not been addressed, these are not clinical entities that require a hospital. And that seemed very clear to me and my colleagues as we tried to make sense of the experiences of some patients. I was really pleased that the families who described some of the events in the lives of their daughters and sons were able to think through what it was that they very much wanted. And I think the lessons from the families and the patients, the former patients themselves, are really quite powerful. In learning disability services and in autism services, we talk about person-centred plans, and you've probably seen volumes of these as well as I have. The families asked for relationship-centred. They wanted services to be relationship-centred, and they wanted their relatives to be supported in their communities. They wanted empathic and mature staff. Many families spoke about their concern about the appearance of some of the staff at Winterbourne View Hospital. Wayne, who we saw, was over 6 foot tall, over 18 stone, and quite terrifying with the tattoos, and families were distressed by that. They also want the emotional demands of the work of staff to be recognised. They want trained and skilled staff to have positive experiences of working with people with learning disabilities and autism, to have good role models, to actually want to go to work in the morning. And they want to have effective managers. And I think that has been most crushing for so many families, that the manager was not equal to the task. And they want the experiences that they've acquired in supporting their daughters and sons to be of use to staff. You know, we find that this helps. You may find that it helps with you. They were ignored. And just as Simon's mother there talked about how they were completely out of the frame, that was a very typical picture. I have a brother with a learning disability, and many years ago he was in an appalling service. And I was astonished that with my networks, my experience of supporting and advocating with other people, I could not get anyone to engage with the fact that he was distressed. That's how hard it is for families. And when we surface from the experience, as most of us do in some form or other, we're so tired we don't bother to complain and to tell you how appalling it truly can be. Another lesson is that Winterbourne View Hospital has demonstrated how effectively adults with learning disability and autism can be silenced. I find running away from a place incredibly eloquent. People do not need words. That is such eloquent behaviour. And yet nobody said, this person's run away 15 times. What is that telling us? Nobody asked that question. I think we had a glimpse of how noisy this place was. Some commissioners actually sought a quiet service for patients, and yet they got this incredibly loud place. And a number of ex-patients said it was hard to sleep because it was so loud. There was so much noise in the place.